Following his talks with the Chinese top diplomat Wang and Defense Minister Shangfu, former U.S. Secretary of State Henry Kissinger met with President Xi Jinping, wherein the latter stressed that China and its people will never forget old friends. Hannah Jane Sancho has more.
Chinese President Xi Jinping met with former U.S. Secretary of State Henry Kissinger at the Diaoyutai State Guest House in Beijing on Thursday to discuss relations between their two countries. Xi highlighted the meaning of Kissinger's visit, noting that he is 100 years old and has done more than 100 visits to China. According to the Chinese president, Kissinger's meeting with late Chinese Premier Zhou Enlai at the Diaoyutai State Guest House 52 years ago started the process of the normalization of bilateral relations between the two countries. It can be noted that Kissinger has done secret visits since 1971 as a national security advisor of then U.S. President Richard Nixon, and such meetings paved the way for Nixon's ice-breaking trip in 1972. The Diaoyutai State Guest House is the same place where Kissinger was received as reported by China's state broadcast television CCTV. Xi also said that China and its people will never forget their old friends.
3年多没有见面了，你刚刚庆祝了100岁的生日，我祝你健康长寿。中国有句老话叫做“大德必寿 ”，100岁，100多次到中国来，这2个100啊，合成了你这一次啊。 具有特殊意义的访问，在52年前，也是7月份，就在这里，这是钓鱼台和宾馆的5号楼，周恩来总理和你呢，在这里会见，开启了两国正常化的进程，具有 深远的历史意义，当时是中美关系的一个转折点。中国人呢，不忘老朋友，中美关系永远和基辛格这个名字是连在一起的。中国人民的话，将永远记住。我对你表示高度敬意。
Kissinger, for his part, stressed the need for dialogue between China and the United States instead of a confrontation. Kissinger said that the relations between China and U.S. would be central to the peace in the world and the progress of the societies of the two countries.
Mr. President, it is a great privilege to be able to visit China. And it is extraordinarily courteous of you to arrange the meeting in Villa 5 of the State Guest House, where my first meeting with a Chinese leader took place. And the relations between our two countries would be central to the peace in the world and to the progress of our society.
It can be noted that a flurry of American officials went to China for talks, including U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, and Special Presidential Envoy for Climate John Kerry. For God and my beloved country, this has been Hannah Jane Sancho, SM9 News.
Global leaders, including Brazil's President Lula, expressed weariness over the prolonged Russia-Ukraine conflict and call for a peace deal through dialogue. Jean Domingo reports.
Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva expressed concerns about the ongoing military conflict between Moscow and Kyiv, stating that countries worldwide are growing tired of the situation. Lula was quoted saying, "The world is starting to get tired." He emphasized the need for a peace deal to be brokered between Russia and Ukraine. Lula has predicted that time will come when there will be peace in Ukraine and said that a group of countries will have to be able to talk to both Russia and Ukraine. At a recent summit between the EU and the Community of South American and Caribbean states, European leaders had hoped to sign a statement strongly condemning Russia's actions in Ukraine. But Brazil and Nicaragua objected to include such language in the final declaration. The document was eventually signed by all members except Nicaragua, which refused to support any reference to the Ukraine conflict. Despite NATO's commitment to stand with Ukraine, some Western officials have begun predicting potential waning support for Kyiv due to war fatigue resulting from the prolonged conflict. Lula has been pushing for a peace deal between Moscow and Kyiv. He opposed efforts to isolate Moscow as the sole point of culprit behind the ongoing conflict. The Brazilian president also stressed that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and U.S. President Joe Biden were also to blame for the failed negotiations with Russian President Vladimir Putin to prevent the conflict from happening. Reporting for Newsline World, this has been Jean Domingo, SMNI News.